Well, I hope everybody's happy.
Generally.
Fairly happy.
Well, I don't know how happy you'll be when you learn of the premium grade ass fucking that's coming our way.
Our way?
I'm
us.
open. No, I'm open. You said a premium ass fucking? Because...
That is true. That is true.
This ain't the good kind of ass fucking. This is a fuck ass fucking.
Oh.
I tried to warn people last week. But no, Laura had relevant and interesting things to say. There has been an explosion at the beef silo.
At the meat silo, right. Yeah.
I tried to warn you about the leaking.
I really did wonder if we were going to talk about the beef silo. Yeah.
Well, the beef silo's exploded now. There's no beef silo to talk about. There's mints everywhere. The Mayor of Shropshire is on the phone. He's furious.
Is this you telling me how dare I have had a thing to bring to the start of the show? There are consequences now because I brought a thing.
I'm just saying, right? It's all right for you two. You're only going to get some ass fuck splashback. I've got to take the full dick. The level of ass fuck that I am getting from Shropshire, Gloucestershire, and Derby cannot be quantified in beef alone. But if it was, it would be several £100 of ass fuck.
It's so hard to take the names of British towns in the north seriously.
I know. I laughed on the phone. That's half the reason why the mayor's so fucking angry. I said Shropshire, more like Stropshire. He didn't like that. But then, considering that there is mince grease currently soaking into the ground of the most fallow farm in Shropshire, it's not good news. The pigs have started drinking the soil. I'm getting ass fucked over the pigs. I'm getting ass fucked over the greasy soil.
Look, I'm looking at the news, I'm reading about it now, seeing how bad it is. From what I can see here, the beef's gotten all the way from Bell End to Brown Willie, and that's a bad set of places.
Not Brown Willie.
No, it's everywhere from Shitterton to Twat. Ugh.
I really hoped it would stop at Foreskin Wallow. Come on. Well, so long as it doesn't get as far as Areola's Breach, then we will be fine. But, well, I say fine. Obviously, there is going to be a modicum of ass fucking at the very least. Christ. Okay. I apologise if I'm a bit distracted on the podcast. I'm taking calls. I'm making amends. International treaties, beef treaties have to be signed. Do you know how complicated a beef treaty is?
In the politest way possible, like, 2/3 of us on this show have ADHD. If any of us on this show are distracted at any point, that's not new.
And I'm playing Satisfactory.
Yeah, we've all got equally valid medical reasons to be distracted. Welcome to Podquisition. It's a podcast.
Yeah, that's enough of politics.
We talk about video games sometimes.
Yeah, when we're not being ass fucked.
Who's played video games this week they want to talk about?
I have... Okay, so I don't want to talk about a video game. Last night I saw The Substance.
Oh.
Have you
no, I've seen The Substance.
I keep hearing the name. I don't know anything about it.
It is the hardest to recommend best film I've seen this year.
Yeah, it's like, I really, really enjoyed it. There are things I don't feel are necessary, but the excess of them is such a part of the general aesthetic and tone of the piece that it's hard to recommend trimming some of that fat. Agreed.
So for Steph, who has no idea what this is, the basic pitch is that there is a woman in Hollywood who's like, she's getting pushed out of her TV career because she's getting older, and Hollywood doesn't like women being allowed to physically age. And through a series of events, she ends up injecting herself with this stuff called the substance.
And it changes her life. That's as far as I think you should take it. I had known that, the general premise. The function of it was such an interesting surprise like the way the substance works.
Yeah, without getting too much into it, it is a film, like, mechanically it is a film about someone trying to put off becoming older
Yeah.
at ridiculous self-sacrifice.
And, and it's about celebrity culture and, our body image, cultural requirements and things of that nature. But
it is...
It's really, really good. And it's fascinating because there's so much DNA of, like, other directors that I really, really love in this film. Like, there is, as difficult as it is, because the dudes both of these dudes are assholes. There's Kubrick and Aronofsky is all over this shit. And on a brighter note, there's like, Boots Riley's sort of aesthetic is in this too. And I want to go find their earlier film. They have another movie called Revenge, which normally I would be put off on the premise because I just don't need another rape revenge movie. I don't need to see another one of those.
Having seen the substance, I would trust this person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
To try and sell it, it is a 2.5-hour film that doesn't feel that length by any means.
I can sell it to Steph easier than that, though. It's the best practical body horror you've seen in 2 decades.
Oh,
God, yeah.
Oh, I'm in.
God, yeah. It is equal parts fantastic film about the realities of trying to stay eternally young and that being like a foolish pursuit, and the terrors of men in Hollywood and the ways that young people will do things they know are reckless and will cost them in the long run because it's easy to detach yourself from the realities of what that is going to involve. But it is also gently creeping and then massively accelerating, fascinating practical body horror.
Yeah.
It's a whole bunch of the body horror of the mundane, and then definitely not the body horror of the mundane.
And what I find so interesting about that, like, because there are a couple of points where I thought, this film should be about over, but I hadn't been looking at the clock, so I didn't realize how much more movie there was to go, and it keeps going, and in some fascinating, interesting directions.
Yeah, it keeps going past what you think would be the ending point, but not in ways that feel like it's dragging itself out.
Yeah.
It feels like this would be a place for some closure, and instead they use it as a place to keep pushing. And I appreciate that.
It does assault the senses, like, a lot. In the beginning, in some ways, and in the end, in some similar but very different ways.
I would struggle to recommend it to anyone who might feel nauseous at the sight of, like, old meat. There's certain things where I'm like, I would struggle to recommend it.
That's a little insensitive to bring up with the beef silo exploding.
the other bit of content, like, there are lengths of the film that Linda and I barely watched because I am looking out of the corner of my eye.
Agreed.
Because there is some, a very visceral and lengthy sequences, particularly involving injection, which neither of us do well with.
I think they are very necessary to what the film is trying to do, while also having watched them peering through my eyes in places.
Yep.
It is a film that needs to linger in the reality of what it's doing.
Yep.
God, I don't know that I've had a year where my 2 favourite films has been as diametrically opposed as they are this year, because my favourite 2 films are this and The Wild Robot, an animated film about a robot that washes up on an island and takes care of a little baby goose. And they could not be further from each other.
Yeah, Steph, I think you'll really appreciate this.
Yeah. I've seen it recommended, and didn't look into it. Like, I didn't get around to looking into it, but...
And I would avoid looking into it more other than to find a means to watch it.
Yeah. I went in knowing a 1-sentence pitch, and... Yeah, going in not knowing quite what to expect out of it, it's something.
Yeah, and you know, even with the like amount of description that we've provided, it will still not line up at all with what is in your head, which is great. That is it really is accomplishing something there. Demi Moore is incredible in it.
Absolutely, like a career-making performance. Like it is a absolute masterclass.
It also like really crystallized for me that like anyone who appears to be under the age of 30 is just like not attractive to me anymore. Like, holy crap. Like, she gets young and I'm like, oh, that's kind of disappointing. Can I have the other one back?
You've taken all the character out of the nudity, you see.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, what have you played?
I'll jump in with a video game that I don't have a lot to say about because I'm just continuing to play a game, but I continue to think it's really good. I'm still, where I have time, plugging away with Metaphor ReFantazio.
I'm almost ready to start that.
I gave up on that, but I'll talk about that after.
No, feel free to jump in if you want, Steph.
I couldn't hack it. I couldn't.
That's fair.
And I say that as someone who, really liked Persona 5. There's something about this one that just felt so weirdly tedious. Partially, it's the utter uselessness of physical attacks versus how hard it is to get mana back, to the point where you end up reaching a part of any dungeon where it's like, well, now I've just got to go back to town and sleep and come back. The other was, like, just the fights. The fights were so tedious and dull to me. I got as far as, it wasn't very far, I got as far as some sort of mini sub-boss who had 4 or 5 skeletons with him, and it just felt like it's just too much of a tree to chop. And then I missed with a magic attack, and I'm like, I ain't getting that mana back. And then I stopped.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I really wanted to like it. I see how it is good, but I just don't want to spend my time on it, which is stupid when you hear what I've been playing, but...
Well, we'll get to what you've been playing in a minute, but I've been continuing to plod away with this game. I'm like 25 hours in now, which from what I can tell is like, I'm maybe halfway in. I'm maybe coming up on the halfway point. I continue to be impressed by how much this game is like backing away from the fantasy racism to just be very direct about real world stuff. I'm going to tell you about one very short little side questy encounter I stumbled upon in 25 hours that like has really stuck with me. There is a character who's a little girl who's maybe like 7 or 8 years old, and every now and then I'm coming back from my adventures to go check in on this character. We went out walking through town on this like maybe like 3 or 4 minute long little excursion, and she sees a homeless person. And she asks this she gives the homeless person some of her lunch and asks, "Why don't you have any food? Why don't you have a place to live?" And this homeless person explains, like, my parents died, I had to flee from war, and I just don't have anyone to help. And this kid has lost a parent fairly recently, and like it's not immediate that anything comes of this. But you come back later and have another conversation with this kid, and you realise this kid is spiralling about the existence of homeless people and the fact that one of her parents died, and worrying, am I going to end up like this? Will the caregiver who's not my parent who's looking after me, will they leave me like that? Is that what happens when your parents die? Do you become homeless? And watching like a 7-year-old kid grapple with, I want to help this person, but also... Is that the punishment for not having parents? Is that what homelessness is? And then having just a very direct conversation about that situation. And, like, the game keeps doing things like this, where I'm like, sure, I could point out that, like, part of the reason that person isn't being supported on the street is because they have cat ears, and they're, that's their fantasy racism element. But increasingly frequently, it becomes, like, irrelevant to actually bring up the fantasy racism that's involved. Because it's talking about things much more directly. It's using the fantasy racism to get the foot in the door, and then going, hey, first coming to terms with the understanding that some people just live on the street and don't have a home? That's a lot to understand, and you have to kind of nurture in children. That is a thing that we should do something about, rather than they've done something wrong to end up there. And in trying to reassure a kid, that's not going to happen to you. It's not a punishment that happens to people. You kind of have to address. Sometimes it happens to people for reasons that are completely unfair. And all we can do is try and help, because sometimes bad things happen to good people. And like, that was just like a little interaction that was an optional little side thing completely unrelated to the main plot that was happening. And this game keeps doing stuff like that, where I will have like a really interesting conversation about like the real world realities of oppression and the ways that different groups are treated, while talking to like a little mouse with huge ears. And I really like this game. I'm having a good time with it.
I'm jealous. I'm super jealous. I think maybe I'll start giving it another go when I've gotten through some other things. Because, you know, I spent fucking money on it. I want to like it.
If you go back to it, I will reiterate advice I gave before, which is make your main party member a mage, and do overworld battles with the mage. That gets you magic back automatically over time. Every time you knock out a little nothing enemy, you get your magic back.
I've been doing that as well, but like that started to feel grindy. But I will, if I pick it up again, you know, because I was taking your advice, I was doing like leveling up the healer and using the mage for staff. I might just end up reading like a big sort of tip article or something.
It's what I've been doing a bit. It's like any time where I come up against a wall, I'm like, internet, tell me how to get around this. I don't want to be to feel like I'm grinding against it. I just want to see more of what it's got to show me.
Like, I was getting into the story, but the fights were just frustrating me. I was like, I'm spending all this mana that I don't want to spend because I'm going to have to work to get it back. And even the most simple enemies, if they're not low level enough, feel like they just take too long to kill and stuff like that. And the amount of damage they're doing in return, and I feel like I'm spinning too many plates here.
The other thing, and I know it's not easy to get into the mindset for with Persona, like, I'm really resistant to doing it. Sometimes it is just leave the dungeon for that day, sprint back to where you were next time you go in the dungeon. I will say, like, as far in as I am now, I know it's really easy to go, yeah, but that's using up extra days and I'm doing less. You've got way more than the time you need. The game clearly does want you to leave and come back, even though I'm refusing to do it and I'm being stubborn about it.
It's not even so much the days being lost, it's my time being lost. If the travel points were better placed, I might mind less. But sometimes they're like, I've got to walk all the way back to get to the travel point, to get to the dungeon entrance.
I will say, I wish that this functioned more like Persona did, in that, you know, you can find like restrooms in the dungeon, that like everyone sits around a table and you can save. In Persona, those refill your magic. I do think this would be a better game if they refilled your magic in those rooms.
I was so confused. I was like, okay, where's the bit where we rest? Where's the restoration thing? Where is the thing that this room should be used for? And I was I thought I'd missed something for ages.
No, I genuinely think that does make it a worse game.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it's been like that in past games from this team, and they took that away, I don't know why they made that choice.
It's baffling.
Yeah. But what about you, Steph? What have you been playing this week?
I'm in no position to accuse any game of wasting my time. I'm in no position. I became addicted to a terrible MMO, and I've had to stress. Like, I'm doing the final draft on my review of it now, and I said so on my live stream as well. Like, I am stressing everywhere I talk about this. The fact that I have been glued to it for the past week is not an endorsement. The only thing it's a testament to is how calculating its design was, and how scientifically exacting its gameplay loop was. I am on the hook in a bad game. And I have been struggling I've not stopped. I've spent hours of my life, my finite life, chopping trees and fishing and hitting boulders with a pickaxe. And I can't say I've had a terrible time. I can't say I've had a good one. I'm just compelled at this point. The game is New Worlds Aternum, which is Amazon's new attempt to get some life into its MMO.
This is one of their attempts, because don't they have multiple?
Probably.
I think Throne and Sword Liberty is one of theirs. Like, they have multiple MMOs for some reason.
Yeah, messaging around this one, like, is fucked anyway, because when I was streaming it, people were like, so is this a new game? Or is it an expansion? Or what is it? And I'm not sure, because it came to consoles, and I got it on that. And so I'm treating it like an all-new release. But it is clearly some updated version of an existing one, because Amazon brought out New Worlds. From what I understand, it flopped, and this is them having another crack at the whip with New Worlds Aternum.
So this is their Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn.
I think so, and it's good to compare this to other things, because it's made out of other things. The game could have just been called MMO the MMO. It's one of the most MMO games to have ever MMO'd. It's just got all the MMO stuff in it, and nothing more. Nothing that is really unique to itself. It's got all the usual stuff. It's got your PvP, your PvE, your raids, your crafting, your endless fucking crafting. All of which has grinding attached. The best way to let you know the type of game it is you have a skill to grind in logging, chopping down trees, and a grindable skill in woodworking, which is working with the chopped up trees. That's two skills. To chop the wood
That is
work
two.
the wood.
Like what you described there, it's like Ultima Online was, frankly.
Oh yeah, like I said, it's MMO the MMO.
It is ancient. That is ancient design.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's reminding me of playing RuneScape like 15,
Yep.
like 20 years ago.
For me it was, because I never played any of the true old schooly ones, but for me it brought up Guild Wars 2 was the one that I sort of got a little into for a while.
Oh, I forgot I played Guild Wars 2 for a week and a half.
Yeah. I haven't played many MMOs in my time. Guild Wars 2, I did Knights... was it just called The Old Republic? The Star Wars one.
I did the DC Universe Online one for maybe a month.
Yeah. This one, I think just because it hit me at a vulnerable point in my life. So I've put more into this than any other one. Again, not because it's good. The thing crashes constantly. I have never played a console game that has crashed this much. And that is saying something, because I was talking about that with Starship Troopers. This makes Starship Troopers look like the very personification of stability. It can crash multiple times an hour, certainly several times every session I've had. And that's just the crashing. Obviously, there are other bugs as well. I had one where the entire HUD wouldn't load, including things like the targeting reticle, all of your XP, notes, your items, and on-screen interaction prompts. So I could look at a tree, but I couldn't chop it because I didn't get a little picture of a square come up to let me chop the tree.
Oh.
All sorts of fuck. Yeah, that was a new one on me. You've got, like I say, systems within systems, and a lot of this won't be new if you've played MMOs in the past several decades. You've got your XP, your separate weapon levels, your territory level, because you've got reputation in like a dozen different territories that all unlock the same stuff, but you just got to keep doing it. Each territory has its own storage. That's not universal. So if you move to a new area, then you've got to move all the stuff manually and deal with the encumbrance and the resource caps and the fact that everything has a fee attached to it. Fast travel, it's petty. It's cunty amounts. Like 25 cents to trade. You can't even sell an item or craft an item without paying a tiny little amount of in-game money for no reason other than to remind you that you're not playing a game, you're playing a quote-unquote service, and that this is how the world should work, that you should be expected to pay something with every little activity you do. And that's before we get to the actual paying. The thing with this game is, I think I'd be a lot more positive if the things it was doing to keep me looped weren't entirely in the service of evil. And again, a lot of MMOs are like this, but it's got microtransactions out the wazoo. It's one of those games that will eventually put me off, because no matter how addicted I might get to it, I will wake up one day and realise I'm never going to get the really cool shit. No matter how much I play, because that's not what this game is for. I will never get that really cool helmet, because it wants me to spend more money on it. And one of two things will happen. I will either take that as apt discouragement and stop, or I will feel the microtransactions pull on me too much and be forced to stop. Obviously, it's got battle passes as well. Don't worry about that. Nonetheless, I've spent hours fishing. Also, when I first started playing, the game auto-picked my server, and the servers had names. And it chose one called Phoenix. The first thing this game ever showed me, was a big text on the screen that just said, "Entering Phoenix." And let me tell you, that's a lot more fun. A lot better way to spend my time than playing New World Aternum. There's all sorts of little complaints I could give you for it, but I don't know. Suffice to say, it's an MMO. And it's got all the MMO
It's
stuff.
one of those MMOs.
I'll say some nice things. Like, the aesthetic I like quite a bit. Like, the gear that you can get, even the in-game stuff, looks nice. It's got a slightly less cartoonish Fable look to it. A lot of saturated colours. I like that. I'm a big fan of vivid, saturated colours. The different environments, especially when sunlight hits it, looks really pretty. The combat and the weapon leveling is probably the only area of the game where there isn't stuff that's way more convoluted and complex than it needs to be. So I appreciate that. The combat is actually decent. For an MMO, it's a lot more responsive and a lot less feeling like you're just trading damage back and forth. You know, you've got blocking and dodging and stuff. Like, it feels a lot more like a more action-oriented combat system than a traditional MMO one. And it's nice. Like, every weapon is interesting. Even things you'd think are boring, like a great axe, like a pure strength weapon, a big old axe. You can unlock an ability where you throw it and it rips open a hole in reality that drags enemies, towards it. And that's such a wonderfully ludicrous concept. And it's one of those things where I look at this game and I'm like, I think I would praise it unequivocally in many areas if I wasn't constantly reminded of the evil. Some actual imagination went into these weapons. The most humdrum, the most basic sword and board weaponry has interesting abilities and interesting passives to unlock. Every single weapon I've tried has been fun to use. If anything, I'd be happy if they took all the RPG shit out and focused on making an actual action game. If they made that combat system more developed, I reckon they got the basis of a good game there, like a real good game. But obviously they wanted an MMO because they think that's where the big bucks are, even though it's the MMO bandwagon was a huge mistake, just as we saw with the live service bandwagon, which is just an evolution of that. And I think the fact that New Worlds flopped the first time should have been a warning. But hey, Amazon wants to make its money. Also, fuck MMOs that have, resources that every player has access to. So if someone gets a rare resource before you've got to wait around for 20 minutes for it to respawn. Fuck, I fucking hate that. I shot an animal and was going to skin it, right? It was, a pretty, valuable one. I shot it, and as I ran over to it, some cunt ran up to it in front of me and skinned it first. That was it. The thing I fought, reward gone. I hate that shit. Plus, all I can think about are the Amazon executives who are, twiddling their dicks, getting off on making a player base compete for resources. They gotta fucking love that.
What? All the little people running around fighting over scraps?
All the people fighting, and that is what it is. You are fighting for scraps. They call it PvE, but it is its own form of PvP. Fucking every time I find the weirdwood trees, I'm like, oh, weirdwood trees, no one's around, and as I chop, someone starts chopping. Oh, that reminds me. As much as I could praise the weapons, this game possibly has the worst weapon sound effect I've ever heard. it's worth looking up online if someone's done a video on them, because they're so notable, I'd be surprised if someone hasn't. But a giant axe, when you hit a skeleton with it, it shouldn't go... That's all it does, just... Some of them sound like wet farts, some of them sound like plastic scissors going through paper. I don't know where they got those sound effects. I'm guessing some stock library. But they didn't even look onto the weapons tab. I don't know where they pulled them from, but those are not weapon sound effects. They are sound effects designed by a weapon. Anyway, that's it. That's it. That's my thoughts on it. I'm going to go back to playing it after this. I hate myself.
What about you, comrade? Are you engaged with anything else this week?
Nah, just satisfactory. It's just the slow crawl of rebuilding all of the things that I had built previously and then making them more aesthetically pleasing to myself. That's it.
The most important work.
Right.
The most vital work
Exactly.
that needs to be done.
Yeah.
I've started playing something else this week. I've not had a huge amount of time to do so, but Hades 2 got its first big update since it entered early access.
I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is in the last couple of days. This is the Olympus update, and it feels like they've added another substantial amount of stuff to that already quite substantial feeling game. The big thing I've been exploring, so for any of you that picked this up when it first went into early access, I think it's not too spoilery to say there are two directions you can go in this. There are sort of two paths to try and progress through. And one of them was decidedly not complete when this first entered early access. One of those directions, you would get to a certain boss, and the game would have dialogue that would sort of knowingly nod at the fact that they hadn't made the stuff that goes after that. And they have now. Meaning that I have been able to continue going along that second path a bit further. I really like some of the new stuff they're doing with enemy designs. There are some enemies that feel very different to anything I've previously fought, and some very different aesthetically, but also in terms of how they feel to move around in levels to go to, which has been enjoyable. It feels like the game is throwing new weapons at me, which is really nice. It's meaning that even going through the stuff that I've already played is feeling fresh, because I don't know if this is 100% correct, but it feels like all of the weapon categories that already existed, I unlocked a new weapon in them. So all of the weapon types were here's at least one new thing in that class of weapon to start playing around with, plus an entire new weapon category of its own that seems to be some kind of cloak that is a weapon. And I've not had a chance to play around with that a lot yet, but that's intriguing. Whole host of new dialogue. I know that's not going to be of any interest to you, Conrad, but suddenly all of the NPCs have gotten very chatty again with new stuff to be talking about, new gods to be interacting with for boons, which is the big one I'm excited about. There's at least a couple of ones from the first game where I was like, oh, I would love to... Where are you? Why can't I be doing your boons? That seemed like maybe they're going to be options again, and I'm happy about that. I've maybe done 4 or 5 runs since the update came out, and it's a big chunk more Hades 2, and I don't have time to be playing more Hades 2, but it's too good. And it took maybe a run or two to get my rhythm back, and I'm already well and truly recaptured by it. So not a lot else to say other than they put more Hades 2 in Hades 2, and I'm going to inevitably be sucked back in. I didn't realise how much I'd played of that first batch. I was coming up on 60 hours before this first big update.
It was a nearly Hades length early access dump, so
yeah. And this is not even 1.0, which if this is anything like the original Hades, 1.0 will be another big batch of stuff on top of that.
Yep.
Yeah, I continue to feel like this is one company that is allowed to do early access. They've not steered me wrong yet.
Well, they certainly do manage it well.
They don't make me feel swindled with early access at all.
I'm a huge fan of early access when it's done right.
Me too.
And
yeah.
obviously we've seen so many piss takers, but I'm really glad Hades did it that way. The last one and this one, and there have been another couple, like Vampire Survivors did early access as well.
Yeah, Yeah.
And I think it says a lot that these games, when they use early access right, become some of the most feature-rich, content-heavy games to have come out in recent times.
There are games in this genre that I have played for less playtime than this early access release.
Yeah, absolutely. It just goes to show you what a wonderful thing early access can be. And it's sad that so many piss takers tried to use it for a quick buck. Because I think, like, some of the piss takers probably would have made more money overall if they hadn't have tried to go for a quick score. Because if you provide something good and people want to support it, they will keep giving you the money for it.
Yeah.
What about you, Steph? You been playing anything else this week?
Yeah. I didn't know this was coming out until I saw it yesterday, and I bought it because
I know what this is.
Of course I would buy it. In the year 2024 current year argument, it was decided that we needed an 8-bit Rocky Horror Picture Show game.
It is a Rocky Horror Show game.
You are right.
And the reason is, for anyone who thinks I'm just, like, nitpicking, it's a rights thing. The film and the stage play are different beasts in licensing.
I'm so used to saying picture show, but you are absolutely right. The game itself isn't overt with its distinction, but it does have little bits here and there to let you know, like, for example, a lot of the dialogue is, like, just taken straight from the show. But there are little bits like when Janet asks Rocky, can you talk? And he says, in some versions of this story, yes. Which I thought was quite cute. So, yeah, Freak Zone Games did this. And if you play Freak Zone Games, then you know sort of what the score is here. It is an NES-style game. A particularly simple one. Very basic platforming with throwing blocks around to make platforms to jump on or to throw at enemies. And that, honestly, is the gameplay. But the gameplay isn't the draw. What the draw is just the stupidity of the idea. The wonderful stupidity of it. And the 8-bit renditions of the soundtrack, which are lovely. I did spend the first several levels playing it with a big smile on my face. Like, it takes you all the way through. Like, you have a little opening cutscene. A big scroll of text, which is the inspector's monologue with, I can't remember the name of the song. You know, Lips, Big Lips song.
Science fiction double feature.
That's it. Fucking hell, I'm embarrassed to get that wrong. Then there's a little cutscene with Red and Janet in their car with Damn It Janet. Then there's a light plays on the first level as you make your way to the castle, which they of course approach like in Castlevania, sort of coming up and looking up. Then you go into the castle and you meet Riff Raff, and then you do some platforming in there while an 8-bit time warp plays, and it just goes through the story that way. I really like the music. It's very cute. I did reach a point where I had to stop just because I don't care for a lot of old school platformers in general.
Sure.
They'd be really fucking annoying. And I did just start to get a bit annoyed by some of the trickier sections. Not that the game's doing anything wrong there. That was just me being like, you know what, I've had enough of this for now.
It's being true to its,
Yes.
aesthetic and design, yeah. And that's not unfair. But those games can be frustrating as fuck. And as someone who loves, plays platformers, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like, the bosses especially are just, like, they're running back and forth, and you're, like, trying to jump over them and stuff. And I found the picking stuff up to throw it, like, sometimes doesn't feel too responsive, which makes that trickier than it should be. But, it is what it is. It is a very simple, straightforward, decent little thing. I don't think it's brilliant. The gameplay is so rudimentary, and it really is not the draw. So this one is very much if you are a big fan of Rocky Horror, and the concept alone delights you, you'll get what you want from it. And I will say I got what I wanted from it, because I knew going in that this was going to be an NES-style platformer, and I was prepared to not be mega fond of that. But I was delighted by the concept, so I was delighted whenever something happened. And I could point at it and say, I know that from the thing.
I Freak Zone, they are my kind of people pretty clearly in terms of the artistic content that they are drawn to, and the idea of making these sort of games out of intellectual property that it doesn't really make sense to make video games out of, right?
Yeah.
But if you were forced to make a video game, it would probably be a simple platformer or something. It's that kind of, it's almost evoking what the 90s was like in video games, where everything had to have a video game and it was going to be a platformer if you couldn't come up with a better idea. And there's a nostalgic charm to that works for me. Yeah, I'm probably going to pick this up and play it, and maybe I'd just be better served, like, looking for the soundtrack, but I'm gonna play this. The other thing I want to note, since we're on the topic of Rocky Horror, if people out there have not seen Shock Treatment, the follow-up film is probably the way to describe it.
Whenever I am watching or doing anything like Rocky Horror related, I always think of Shock Treatment and you recommending it, and I still haven't fucking watched Shock Treatment. I need to change that because you have recommended it in my presence for years.
Yes. Yeah. It's a really interesting film, and like there's a lot of elements surrounding it that are kind of curious too. It's hard to support because it is a strike-breaking film. They had to relocate the shooting to a soundstage in England because of a strike going on here in the States. They'd originally intended to shoot the film in Texas. But it is a second Brad and Janet story set in Denton after their marriage, when it's kind of falling apart. They take a visit to the local TV studio, and the new owner of the TV studio decides to make her a star, and it goes from there. And it has its own celebrity commentary and predicted in a lot of ways the rise of reality television. It's a fascinating little artifact.
Plus Rick Mayall's in it.
Yep, Rick Mayall's in it. They've got a song that's pretty good. I think all the music in this is, for the most part, with a few exceptions, like there's nothing as catchy as Time Warp in it. The ballads aren't really there. So like There's a Light, there's nothing on that level, but also every vocal performance from Janet's performer is 1,000 times better than anything Susan Sarandon does in Rocky Horror. She just has a better voice, and that's just the way it is. Really good movie. I like it a lot. So go see Shock Treatment if you like Rocky Horror at all. It's very different. The tone, the vibe, I can see why audiences at the time bounced off of it, but I think it's great. Anyway.
Yeah. Is that everything we've played this week?
I think so.
I feel like I've played other things, but I can't remember them, so let's just go.
Okay, well, in that case, we got a couple of newsy bits this week. The first one of these, I can't tell you about. I can tell you that I signed up for a mysterious Nintendo Switch Online playtest that recently got 10,000 people to sign up for it, and Nintendo would like me to not say anything about what that is or is not. But there are some news articles that have popped up online alleging what it might be, if either of you want to talk about that in this weird situation.
Yeah, so this is like another one of those Steam puts out big game to thousands and thousands and thousands of people, tells people not to say anything about it, and then possibly exacts some form of vengeance when their request, I guess, is ignored. This seems to be some kind of Minecraft alike that Nintendo is putting out there. Players work together to, quote, fully develop a massive expansive planet by utilizing creativity and farmed resources, according to something Nintendo provided, reportedly.
I can neither confirm nor deny, but reportedly.
Yeah, there are beacons that heal the land, and there's some sort of social hub that people interact with each other. And Nintendo has copyright struck all of this information that, from the sources that first released it. And Wario64 online is always posting about this, and then someone in there replies, put some screenshots up, and it's all wiped. So,
yeah, hope Nintendo doesn't kill me for this. Media not displayed, media not displayed, media not displayed.
They did, well, we don't, and someone should check on this guy, on Ethan this guy.
Yeah.
Someone check on him. Make sure, we need proof of life. So, yeah, this is going to launch, I guess, as of today. People are listening to this, and it's going to run for a couple weeks.
And Nintendo definitely will be able to stop people from sharing video footage of it.
Yeah.
Like, the internet's definitely not going to be flooded with countless live streams of it.
But we are going to be caught in this weird space of, oh, Jesus Christ, this can't turn into a marketing ploy. This cannot...
Yeah, because, look, I put this on the topic list not necessarily because I thought you would be interested in, the specifics of
No,
the
you
thing,
just wanted to wait
but
and listen to the little gears in my head slowly click into place like tumblers in a lock to release my rage.
I'm not in a... Look, I know things, so therefore I'm not supposed to speculate, but I thought you might have some interesting speculating, and I'm glad to see you're on a trail here.
Oh, because this is going to work. There are going to be hundreds of live streams popping up all over the place, and Nintendo will play whack-a-mole with them, and it will blow it up into an even bigger story. And the
Streisand effect. It really does seem, if this is what I've been given access to, if the reports are true, big quotes, it sure does seem like a good way to get people excited about a new Nintendo game would be, a secret group of people got sent a new first-party Nintendo game and they're not allowed to talk about it, but there's footage and you can come see the first look at Nintendo's weird thing that's not very Nintendo. You wouldn't expect them to make this. Sure seems like a way you would market a thing.
It all depends on how you punish the violators, I guess, ultimately. Is if there's a punishment that's in any way lasting or significant. If it's just that you're removed from the playtest, you've probably already served your purpose.
I mean, reportedly they do want more out of people during the playtest, but...
Yeah, but if you have a large enough user base...
Yeah. Enough of them will play by the rules that you'll get the info you need.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm... I don't know. It feels excessively cynical to think that this is done with the intent of developing a marketing plan, and you need a wide-scale beta test too, though. You do.
The alternative is that you have to assume that they're really naive to think that they can put this out and genuinely keep it under wraps with little more than a please don't talk about it.
I don't think that they're naive. I'm saying that it's this is a possibly beneficial side effect. It is a making the best of of an outcome that you would not prefer, right? It is hard for me to see this as explicitly a cynical marketing ploy so much as a necessary action that must be taken for which you can also spin a benefit in a marketing sense out of. And the fact that that's happening is kind of gross, but also Nintendo don't really, their online it's good, but when you're doing something new like this, there's gonna have to be some outside testing of a scale that I'm not sure that you can safely accomplish through your testing partners and so forth.
I will say this about publicly known stuff, and definitely not anything I know. It is curious seeing Nintendo, allegedly, try to do something multiplayer on this kind of scale, but also to treat it so differently to how they have historically handled server testing for online games. Because usually what they will do is open the floodgates to everyone for a maximum of about 3 days with a demo that anyone can download. Like, they've done it before with, like, hey, here's the Splatoon multiplayer, download it, you've got, like, 3 days to server test it. This seems to be, allegedly, like 2 weeks of playtesting for a limited but large number of people who aren't supposed to talk about it, but are getting considerable hands-on time with something quite expansive. It's a weird approach and a weird situation, allegedly.
I don't know. I mean, only thing that's really that weird about it is that there's been no product announcement in advance. Otherwise, this is just a beta test.
Yeah. That's the thing, is just announce the thing and say, hey, there's going to be a beta test, not everyone will get in.
You know, and maybe they decide it's disastrous and cancel the whole project and they don't want any more embarrassment than they are already going to suffer. Hard to say. I mean, it is this level of ambition for a Nintendo online product, just based on what's described, it's not like them. They've stayed so far out of this sort of interactivity space where online stuff is concerned. And I think with good reason in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
But a vastly different product may require them, or they may feel requires them to take a different approach. And I'm curious.
I'll put it this way. If a week from now, literally everyone's talking about it and it's clear that there's no ramifications, maybe I'll be talking about whatever this is next week. And I'm curious about whatever this is alleged to be. We've got a couple of other quick stories this week. Hey, you both know Bloober Team, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maker of so-so horror games that are not great about mental health themes. And then the pretty okay Silent Hill 2 remake. Well, Bloober Team's done making shitty games.
Oh, good.
They're not going to make shitty ones anymore.
Oh, well, I'm glad that
they're going to make good games now. You're not as excited and like full of belief as I expected you to be, both of you.
There's a little part of me that the back of my mind is so you were conscious of the fact that you were making shitty games before now, and this is the point at which you decided, like, did you set out to make shitty games? Because that's always the defense that I have of developers who make shitty games, is that nobody starts the project wanting to make a shitty game, and now you're telling me that you've had a change of heart?
It's not even that. It is genuinely a kind of interesting interview to read. It's over on GameSpot, an interview with director and producer Jarek Zeba. And I'm going to paraphrase this interview, but basically what it boils down to is the last couple of Bloober Team games, particularly the medium, were received pretty fucking badly. Or at the very least had very mixed responses, with a lot of people being very critical of choices they made. And they talk about the fact that, like, morale within the studio was pretty terrible at the time. There was a lot of, we're trying and we just can't seem to get this right, and we can't seem to not screw this up. And then they were trusted with Silent Hill 2, and went, we have to get this right, and there's a lot of pressure. And that being well received has made them go, we've learned a lot of lessons, and we want to try and make other stuff that is received like Silent Hill 2 Remake was. There's not a lot that says that, like, that talks about what they've learned or what mistakes they've walked away from, but I'll say this. Silent Hill 2 Remake did bring in sensitivity consultants to not fuck up mental health themes. And if that is one of the lessons they learned, if that's a thing they take forward into their future games, I would love to see that. It would be great to see them have learned from that criticism of their prior games and seen praise of them doing better when they got consultants in and do that in future. But I can't help but look at this piece and think that it's promotion more than anything, because they do have a new game that they've just announced called Chronos: The New Dawn that kind of looks like a Dead Space ripoff. And it's definitely going to be one of the good ones and not one of the shit ones they've made. I don't know that I believe any company that says, quote-unquote, we're going to stop making shit games.
I think the admission that the prior games were shit that's the curious bit to me. Normally, you say, oh, but people didn't respond well to it, but to just be like, yeah, we made bad things because we were in a bad place, and now that's kind of interesting. The honesty about it, 'cause it's not like they don't know, but being honest about it is kind of strange.
I will say that because so much criticism was levelled at, and should have been levelled at, Bloober's approach to tackling mental health, it did draw attention away. And again, it should have, because that was the important thing. But it did mean that a lot of criticism about Bloober's other issues haven't been addressed, which we saw with Silent Hill 2 Remake. I pointed out the Spammerkins, the reliance on really hackneyed horror tropes and just doing them over and over again.
You're not wrong.
And that's where I am at with it. Basically, Silent Hill 2 Remake did not make me start having faith in Bloober or having an all is forgiven approach. Let's face it, the best game they've ever made is a game that wasn't theirs to begin with.
Here's the thing, I'm certainly with you in that Silent Hill 2 Remake didn't make me suddenly go, Bloober's fixed everything and they're going to be good now. But it did make me go, they're capable of more than I expected, or at the very least, there are certain things that I wouldn't have expected from them that they have learned from. We didn't really talk about it when we were talking about Silent Hill 2 a couple of weeks ago. That game has a really robust accessibility suite that fucking came out of nowhere, that I have not seen in anything Konami or Bloober before. And there are little things like that where I look at it and go, you are clearly taking some feedback on board in a way that I wasn't anticipating, and I'm curious to see what you do next. I want to see if you can turn this into a your games get better direction. I'm not expecting it, but I'm not going to be as surprised if it happens as I would have been one game ago. And I want to believe that they can that they can commit and make better stuff and learn from their criticisms of them. We will see. And we got one last story this week. We've talked about before the fact that making a critically very well received video game does not in any way guarantee that you won't just be shut down by corporate overlords.
Mm-hmm.
We're well aware of this, yeah? Well, we have a new example of that. Ubisoft Montpellier, the team behind January this year, I think it was, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which was their side-scrolling Metroidvania Prince of Persia game, which was very well critically received. The studio has been disbanded.
Jesus.
The studio has been disbanded, plans for a sequel are cancelled. That team that made a very well-received, small, affordable video game, nah, they're just gone now.
We can't have those.
Yeah.
Wow.
Apparently, there were plans for a sequel to happen, and Ubisoft were just like, nah, it was really well-received, but it didn't sell enough. Goodbye. Go away, team. You're done. So yeah, once again, hey, making a thing that's really good won't prevent corporate overlords from going, nah, we could save some money if you weren't a thing anymore. We've got to make more stuff that's worse but makes more money.
Mm-hmm. I mean, well, that attitude has been expressed many, many times.
And it's a shame. We don't talk about Ubisoft games here very often, but there are things about that game and that team that were... I talk about accessibility stuff all the time. They announced that game's accessibility support 7 months before it was released. They had a demo available that had all the accessibility stuff in place. They had really interesting stuff they were doing for support for players with aphantasia. And now that's just a team that doesn't exist anymore. Oh, well.
The lack of job security, for reasons completely independent of games being good or bad.
Yeah.
It's so offensive. It's so offensive. And, you know, I've made this point so many times, and I'll keep doing it unapologetically. It is sick that layoffs and closures happen not just regardless of success, but sometimes because of it. Because if you make a company enough money, your reward may be a shutdown or layoffs so that the company can keep telling the shareholders that they're making more money. It's sick. Like, it is fucking sick.
There is literally no way to guarantee your work will result in your job continuing to exist.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's everything for this week. There was no great place to end it, but that's the news.
Well,
that's the stuff.
There we go. I have got an MMO to go back to while questioning everything. Not even questioning. I'm not questioning my life. I know I'm making bad decisions, and I know I don't deserve any nice thing to happen ever again. But Laura, you've always got nice things coming for the audiences to enjoy. Could you tell us about them?
You can find the stuff I'm doing at Laura K. Buzz pretty much everywhere you find stuff on the internet. The big ones, Patreon, that's the one that pays the bills. If you can afford to chuck as little as $1 a month over there, it means I can keep doing this stuff all the time. This week up on YouTube, there'll be a new episode of Accessibility. There's a new Control-Alt-Access episode going up the same day as this. Look forward to a bunch of cool stuff from me next week. I've got big shit happening next week you should look forward to. Laura K. Buzz, you'll find me in all the places. Finally, there's been enough of a mass migration of people that, like, hey, go find me on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
All the cool kids are over there. We finally had the point where, like, all of the games industry and art people moved over because all the art was going to start getting turned into AI and everyone jumped ship. So come find me on Blue Sky. That's where all the cool kids are at. Laura K. Buzz. What about you, Conrad? Where are you out on the internet?
Well, I'm at Conrad Zimmerman on Blue Sky and Instagram, although really Blue Sky. You could hang out with me on Twitch at twitch.tv/thatconradzimmerman. I'm on Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays. You can buy anti-capitalist propaganda and Jimquisition merchandise from me at mercenarycreative.com. And everything that I do online gets supported through Patreon at patreon.com/fistshark. And you know who else has a Patreon? Stephanie Sterling.
That is correct. I have that. It is at patreon.com/Jimquisition. I also stream irregularly, but as regularly as possible at Twitch TV/JimSterling. If you go on thejimquisition.com this week, there should, by the time of talking, be a new Worlds Aternum review up. My next wrestling date is this Sunday. I'm going to be in Manchester for Pinfall Pro Wrestling, where I will finally be tagging with Gain, the original Gain, not the one that actually got all the attention. Obviously, God, every fucking time. But hey, we've got the original and it's going to be fucking great. So that's Sunday, the 27th in Manchester. Look up Pinfall Pro Wrestling for details. And that's that. Thank you all so much for listening and supporting the show. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.